Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Ken Van Liew. Thanks for being on the show, Ken.
Thank you, Whitney. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, Ken started his professional career with a civil design engineering job, twins and 2 master's degrees. Twins would have been enough right there, Ken. But 2 master's degrees also, underpinned with a 6-figure debt and a burning desire to serve others. 3 years later, he cut the ribbon on the development of a $17 million, 72,000 square feet, 113-bed assisted living facility. Alongside the syndication and development of over $1 billion of high-profile real estate investments, Ken created the modern wealth building formula as the fastest track to building wealth, a project that has empowered thousands of developers over the last 20 years. Ken, welcome to the show. Obviously, I want to hear a little more about your background, and like I said, the twins alone would man, that's a degree in itself. But then 2 master's degrees, and then the way you've got into real estate. Give us a little more of that journey and build that picture for us a little bit, so we can move into this modern wealth building formula as well.
No, absolutely. It's been a blessing for me. I wasn't a great student. I loved football, and I was an all-state football player in high school and won a couple of championships. And when I got to college, I figured I would create the 6-year plan. And, I just couldn't pick up on calculus and physics, so I struggled. And I met my wife my 3rd year in college, and I'm still with her today, 38 years later. She taught me how to study. And, that was really the start of a career where I decided, maybe I could be an engineer. And a few years later, I got graduated engineering school. I had won an award on civil design and had to subdivide, and it planted a seed, but I really didn't connect all the dots, with civil design and a little bit of summer job construction and, what's going on with real estate. It was just about the time that Robert Allen came out with the book, Buy a House with No Money Down, and I couldn't even afford a car. My first car was like $700, and it had multi-colors from several accidents and didn't start, so that's kind of what I started. Dad gave me $10 a week, went down to college after, 6-pack and washing clothes. We were pretty much just hustling, and that led eventually to a civil engineering degree, but I was, bored sitting at the table, got back into construction, had an opportunity to build my first building in Poughkeepsie, and that led into skyscrapers into New York City. And it's just been a ride ever since.
Wow. Into skyscrapers in New York City. Tell us, I guess, give us a little insight into what your focus is right now. Like, what are you doing in real estate? What's your business now? Help us to visualize that.
Yeah. And I jumped, and I'll drop back to, the first big one we did, it was back, you mentioned the $17 million assisted living, which was the beginning of the modern wealth building formula. I didn't really know what it was about other than I was finding funding and facilitating developments, and it turned into the formula. But today, we continue to apply the formula. We're involved in a large multi-use development in Chester, New Jersey, which has a 100-year-old restaurant that we're restoring. It has affordable housing, market rate housing, commercial office, and being driven by my first CVS that we signed a lease, really excited about. We have another 13 acres where we're developing anywhere from still in conceptual design between 75 and 100 residential units, and carving out 3 acres for somewhere between 100 and 120,000 square feet of self-storage. We're consolidating land in 3 different towns, Watchung, Warren, and Hanover, at this time, consolidating, trying to create something pretty extraordinary, talking to some, continuing care retirement community groups in the assisted living space. Have some other small subdivisions, and we're also going to take advantage of what we believe is going to be tremendous opportunity across the country, with the upturn happening, with everything and all the excitement. So That's what we're
Nice.
doing, having fun.
Tell us about the modern wealth building formula. What is that? And let's go through that a little bit.
Yeah, the modern wealth building formula was, something I coined after, 30 years. And I never was good at like board games or word puzzles or anything like that. But with all my personal development, I was always thinking Tony Robbins. And I was sitting there one day, and I'm always like, take massive action. And the M popped up. And, and then I had just finished this course with Landmark. It was on wisdom, and the W popped up. And, I didn't want to just be a leader. I wanted to be a bold leader, and then to be, and then I was forward thinking, and I was playing around, and I was like, wow, modern wealth building formula, how to master real estate investing. And what really came from that was, I'm starting to put together what I've been doing all these years, which have been very successful. And looking back, had proven that this modern wealth building formula, which was syndication, I had not only done it on a real estate development out of the box, but I took that top-down thinking and then applied it to multifamily and residential, wholesale, fix and flip, and showed that in almost any type of real estate, eventually, if you want to scale it, it's nice to have a little bit of cash flow, equity available when necessary, share the wealth, give opportunities across the board. Saw it to start to work and said, well, it's really kind of a system on what I've done, I think, a little differently. There's a lot of data out there to find deals, but I find projects a little bit different than everybody. So I had a finding process as part of the system. And I had a funding process. I called it unlimited funding because when I started, I didn't think I was going to be able to finance a $17 million deal. But when I finished that, it gave me the confidence where I was like, okay, I got this figured out. I could do unlimited funding. And the facilitation of a development, I always figured, if you can manage a development, it has all the components. If you find a development, it's the same skill sets that you use in finding a residential multifamily. Funding is kind of the same thing. So I'm not like I'm totally reinventing the wheel, but I had to find, fund, and facilitate 3F system that I called it, which ultimately added in a little bit of injection of, personal development, a little bit of Tony Robbins. And that created this, what I would say, sports enthusiastic modern wealth building formula. When you read the book, it tells you a little bit about the pregame exercise and, where you kind of size up in the lineup if you look at it from a baseball perspective. And it just, you have a little fun with it, and it really comes down to top-down thinking, because if you think from the top, you could pretty much do anything in real estate. And that came from building a couple skyscrapers in New York City.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. I know, building, not just everyone's been a part of building skyscrapers in New York City or anywhere for that matter. But what are some things that you learned from that specifically that have helped you, throughout your real estate career?
Great question. The biggest takeaway, the first takeaway was, this is swimming with sharks every day. There was a book they wrote about that one time. But what I really took away at the end of the day when I wouldn't say left New York City construction, when I paused last year on some New York City construction because of the pandemic. And 2 years ago, I had a concrete company where we poured, a couple 30-story towers. And, after building 1,500 units and 3 million square feet in New York City, I really analogized building a skyscraper as building an extraordinary life. And, I don't want to go off cue with real estate, but, I'm doing it for a specific reason because it applies across the board for anybody. And, I think everybody wants an extraordinary life. And if they could do it through real estate, they get the best of both worlds. And what I learned in New York City construction, and if you've ever, seen a project, obviously you probably have in your neck of the woods, but in New York City, you see this green fence that goes around the site. If say it's a parking lot, or if there's demolition, you see some activity. But this green fence goes around the site, and you just see this green fence. It opens up, once a day. And, it's during this 6 months process that you build this foundation. And, I can only say that the foundations in New York City are the strongest foundations in the world. And like in life, you need a strong foundation because, there's going to be a couple earthquakes. And, pouring concrete structures, I learned that, without that structure that can handle, the earthquake loads and the wind loads, that's the backbone that you get in life that you have to build upon. And in New York City, you know, it's all about the cycle. So as I was pouring concrete, by the time I was up to the 10th floor, if things were managed properly and my project managers were on top of things, you know, we were literally starting the elevators and starting to, you know, install the skin on the building. And that's because, you know, in life, you need a tough skin, you know, because, you know, you're going to weather the storms. And we'd race to the top and, of course, batten down the hatches, you know, with the roof, and then start, you know, life, you know, building that building, you know, and coordinating hundreds of men and getting exhilarated by it. Like there's nothing like waking up in the morning and having, you know, 400 or 500 guys on your job and, you know, things are humming and, you know, you're building the heart and the guts of a high rise, you know, and, you know, and I say to people that are building houses, you know, you could do it. It's just like building 30 houses on top of each other. You're going to get that cycle instead of just going in and framing one. The framer just goes to the second floor. Framer goes to the third floor, followed by the electrician, followed by the plumber, you know, and it's just a cycle you create. And that's what life's all about. You know, it's a cycle and real estate's a cycle, and it's all a fine thread through everything as you really sit back and look at what's going on in life. You know, like I'm not confused, you know, and it's not rocket science.
I think it's interesting. You talk about the 6 months to build a foundation, but it looks like there's really nothing going on.
It really does. There's so much behind the scenes and pre-construction on those jobs. Sometimes we build on paper for another 6 months, but the beauty of it is when it gets to street level, and we used to pride ourselves, you know, my concrete company, that every 4 days we'd have another floor. So, you know, it takes 6 months to get to ground level, but then you're talking, you know, in 3 months, you know, you're up, you know, we go 6 days, 4-day cycle. And you're looking good. All of a sudden, 20 floors pops up in 2 months, and it's game on. You know.
Wow. What are some of the difficulties as a developer that maybe aren't known or seen by just the average real estate investor?
Did you say difficulties or?
Yes.
Yeah, I would think, you know, with developers, you know, there's, you know, more moving parts, which means more personalities. And, you know, what it really comes down to, if you know your game, you know, it's really just more, you know, creating unity and teamwork, eliminating, delegating, automating as much as you can, you know, because you as the, you know, top of the hill or calling the shots, you know, you can't get stuck in other things other than critical path items that if it's delayed, it will delay the project and ultimately cost you extra money, you know, and that's really what the developer does. One of the things that, you know, we've analyzed is this 9-foot matrix of the development process, and segments of that matrix, you know, apply to multifamily. If you're buying a project, you know, may not start with conceptual design, but it starts with intense due diligence that you really have to dive into. You know, and you have to dive into all your contracts and warranties and guarantees, things that you're doing, you know, on the development from the onset. When you're buying contracts out, you know, you're not going to want to deal with warranty and guarantees at the end of the day when you don't have the leverage. You want to take advantage of the leverage you have up front, right? Buy it strong. That's where you make your money. You've probably heard it. You make your money in the buy, you know. So same applies when you're developing.
Awesome. Well, is your focus now? I mean, are you going back to New York City, or is it strictly, you know, assisted living?
No, you know, I've veered away from assisted living. You know, we may get into it. Now there's a lot of talk about, you know, the hotels converting to assisted living. You know, I'm big into the multi-use. We are looking at a property in New York City right now. Something came in, you know, really, really cheap. You know, I have, other than going to visit my daughter who lives on 170th Street, I've been focused on some major New Jersey projects and other, you know, states throughout the country that we're shooting for some things. However, you know, I'm not afraid of Manhattan, and, you know, I'll be back, you know, definitely. And we're looking at Miami right now also, but we have some high rises in our view, and multifamily, and, you know, we'll get involved in anything.
What about that? Maybe you can speak to the market in New York City right now, just after the pandemic, and you know, anything that investors that are considering that market or should know just after everything that's happened there.
Yeah, I believe that now's a good time to pick up some residential in New York City. If you're buying condos, there's a lot of struggle with new stuff coming out of the ground. One of my dear partners is struggling with a project that they just can't sell out right now, which means that there's some inventory that's sitting there. But with people shooting out of the city, and from what I'm hearing on the outskirts, people aren't going back, so there's going to be some discounted offers. And it's something like in New York, 10 years later, you'll be sitting on a nice little profit. And from that standpoint, from big time investment right now, in New York, I mean, I'm sitting back. We saw something come in that was under $400 a square foot, which I think probably a year ago things were up at around 600. So that's a good sign, but we're not quite sure if you build something, whether or not it could absorb.
Yeah, no, that's some great thoughts for sure to be thinking about. Tell me, is there anything you would have done different, Ken, as far as, like from your career, what now, looking back from development, all the high rises, different, even to assisted living, what would you have done differently on the first few deals, or would you have?
Yeah, I probably would have looked, more at just real estate as an asset. I didn't really, my dad climbed telephone poles. My mom was a bank teller, and we did actually own two houses. They had a 2-family house, but no one ever talked about real estate, and I didn't know that real estate, paid residual income. My mom and dad had a job. I probably would have started focusing on residual income earlier. When I first started, I was, grandiose about fees, because I didn't have a lot of equity. And one of the chapters in my book was fee gold, because I sit there going, wow, I can earn fees like 8 or 9 different ways, and I used to give myself a development fee and general conditions and a CM fee. And then I'd work something in on my options and upgrades, and I would squeeze something out of the finance guy. And I did that, and because I was taking smaller percentages and bigger fees. And, I guess I would have just took a little different approach. I would have maybe leaned into, a little bit more mentorship, but I just didn't know any better. I just knew construction and how to test concrete. And, I just kept going in that direction, and it ultimately led to where I landed today.
In the types of deals you're doing now, how do you prepare for a downturn?
With the development right now, we, are fortunate with the multi-use, obviously aren't going to go run and build a commercial right now. So, we are moving along and getting the approvals. The CVS, they're very anxious to move in. The restaurant isn't the most marketable. The affordable housing has helped driving the project. So, we're looking at all the markets, but in our back pocket where that commercial is, I have a deal with Wawa, which they're always looking for a hot corner. And, we are just constantly putting plan Bs in our pocket. In Bedminster, we're doing some stuff, and, there's a lot of opportunities with affordable housing, but, the towns have these settlement agreements that they don't really have a lot of pressure on them. So you're going in with high risk. One site we have doesn't have any utilities on it. So, there's all kinds of exciting things.
What about do you have any predictions for just the real estate industry over the next 6 to 12 months?
Yes. I believe, which I would have never predicted, that there is going to be a continued rise in residential valuation. And I think that it's going to stay strong because what's happened is with the pandemic is everybody has realized that, they're going to be spending more time in their home, possibly working out of the house. They're trying to improve their living quarters, give them more square footage. People are moving into residential. There's millions of dollars in family offices moving towards residential. I see a lot of activity in that area. Multifamily, I think, will continue to, do well, but you're going to have people moving out of multifamily, not paying their rent. So there'll be a little bit of struggle trying to get their own home ownership. Commercial right now, we're not quite sure. The companies are trying to figure out what's going on. They're stuck with leases and things like that. And retail, is going to continued to be challenged. But there's going to be a lot of opportunity in residential.
What about Ken? Do you have any daily habits that you are disciplined about that have helped you achieve success?
Yes, I have a morning ritual where I wake up every day and I do about at least 50 minutes of movement, and I go into a quick meditation. Then I fuel my body, and usually, say hello to my wife at that point, and then I get started with my day after that. But it's usually a morning ritual, and I journal a lot, and I start off every day writing down three things that I'm totally grateful for. I do the same thing before I go to bed. I measure tremendously what I have blocked for the day, how I've done for that day, and part of that habit is generated quarterly, where I sit down and I do kind of a 3-month look ahead on what do I want to accomplish in my 3 main areas of life, which is business, relationship, and health. And then I kind of reverse engineer into those outcomes and try to do what I have to do every day. And the morning ritual just keeps you on track, and being grateful is key.
No, that's awesome. Doing those things every day. And you said, measuring what you've done or what you're doing for the day. Are any tips on that? How you measure anything specifically, or maybe how you track things?
Yeah, great question. I've been doing this a long time, and it's so key that, when you mirror and match something, that you set up measuring. And I measure every day for my personal and my professional life on a scale from 1 to 10. And I call it kind of like my quality quantifier, where on my relationships, I'll say, I had a 7 today. And, it was based on my 3 outcomes that I may have wanted in that area. Because in each area of my life, each day, I have 3 things that I'd like to accomplish. So for relationships, I wanted to connect with my wife, or connect with my kids. I didn't make those calls. I give myself a measurement and I just gauge. And then I do the same for business. And then I measure like what I had written down on my schedule that day and whether I stayed to my time blocks. Because time blocking in the goals and everything you set, if you don't time block to where you want to be in 5 years, you're never going to stay on track and get there. So the whole key to time blocking is, you have to stay focused. The night before, you should time block on what you want to accomplish the next day, have it written down. And the key is the measuring, right? If you're not measuring, like today I had a call, just my social media KPIs, right? It takes 5 minutes, but you establish what the measurement system is. And then, one of my favorite books is The 1 Minute Manager, where, you give people the opportunity to grow. You put, what's the outcome? What's the measuring system? I'll talk to you next week. That's it.
I like that. And if you're not measuring it, how do you know? I mean, if you're improving or not, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And especially over a long period of time. The 1 Minute Manager seems like I've read that, but it was probably 2 or 3 years ago. That's awesome.
I think I read it 20, but it was always, I kind of chuckled at myself, because you can't be a 1 minute manager without having a measuring and system in place to be the 1 minute manager. And it takes a little bit of thought and alignment with the people that are working with you, right? Because they want to be able to grow. And most of those people don't want to be told what to do. Nobody wants to really be told what to do. They want, you got to help people, let them create the idea, so there's a fine thread as I'm sure, in your travels,
What's your best source for meeting new investors right now?
I got to tell you, you're not going to believe this, but I have gotten involved in a organization called Unblinded Mastery. And this gentleman is blind. His name is Sean Callaghy, and he has 2 of the top 100 jury verdicts in the country. And it's been pretty fascinating. And now I forgot the question. I got so diverted on Sean Callaghy. But what I'm doing is I'm doing what's called as merging ecosystems through Real Raw Opens. And, I'd love to share it with your listeners, but go to unblindedmastery.com. And what Real Raw Opens is essentially a shared experience that you've never had before. So with COVID, kind of changing the world, it's not like you're having business lunches with, 10, 15 people. which a lot of law firms, did that to build their businesses. And Sean never built his business that way. Sean built his business by having what he called was real raw opens, shared experiences where he would bring people together. Some are judges, some are role players, some are, contestants, and he creates a contest. But before you start this like fun Friday game contest, or whatever you want to call it, everybody introduces themselves and creates an emotional rapport like you've never had before in a normal, like a normal event. It's not like networking, because what we've realized that networking doesn't work, and through creating these real raw opens and shared experiences where we're doing them almost every day now, where 10 people are coming on board, and now we're moving it out where one day we hope to do 10 a day, and it's growing this organization massively. And it all came from the way he built his 125-man law firm, stepped out, and started to build Unblinded Mastery. And believe it or not, that is bringing all walks of business to life, through this ecosystem merging and shared experience of the real raw open. So I've actually been having real raw opens. I have people like, hey, you bring 3, I'll bring 3, you bring 5. And, we do it on a Friday or we do it on a Wednesday. And it's just an awesome way to merge ecosystems. And I've met investors, and to be perfectly honest with you, I'm now at the stage where this year, we're really engaging with family offices so that we don't have to do as much investor relations, but you always have to do investor relations, and this works. We're meeting high quality people, and check it out.
No, well, check it out. That is interesting. I want to see how that works a little bit. Well, Ken, what's the number one thing that's contributed to your success?
I would have to say, my family, having them, there every day was my real why, having twins and then a third, and, my beautiful wife that just smiles at me every day. I don't know why she's still with me. And I've just been so blessed with 3 amazing kids. And, it was really that, that was my foundation, as we talked about it before, and it's to this day, I just, I love, connecting and hearing, what's new in my children's life each day, and, paying it forward. Just had a conversation with, a young lady, who happened to be in healthcare, and she was just so happy. And, I think that's, it's really just touching people and leaving people with more power and freedom and self-expression and peace of mind from the shared experience and interaction with you.
I usually ask every guest, how they like to give back. You shared a little bit there, but any other ways you want to share that you like to give back?
Yes. If anybody, resonates with what we discussed today, you're welcome to schedule a call with me. I'm very easy to get in contact with. Just go to my website. I believe there's a Discover Now button. That'll lead you to a short video, or I'll teach you a little bit about the modern wealth building formula. And you can schedule a 45-minute strategy session with me where we can talk. That was about the young lady that talked to me yesterday. She had some ideas. She wanted to open up an assisted living. She was a healthcare worker, and she just left the call all lit up. So if I can, bring an idea that you have forward and help you create your dream to help others, that's what we're here for, to bring you to your greatness.
That's awesome, Ken. What is your website, and how can people get in touch with you?
KenVanLiew.com.
Awesome, Ken. Well, grateful to have had you on the show, and just many aspects of just your career and your success. I think we can all resonate with and learn so much from, no doubt about it. I hope the listeners will reach out to you. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you very, very much, Whitney. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.